Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classics series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are continuing our look at the games of the great Italian player Sergio Mariotti. What would a player like Mariotti do against a hedgehog opening? That's the question on everyone's lips, and that is the question we are going to be answering today. So this is Mariotti against Mrdja. A Croatian player. I spent ages practicing the pronunciation and now I've just lost it completely. International master at the Lugano Open in 1982. I think I'll say black from now on. So that's e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4 takes, knight f6, and now f3. Mariotti had a nice line in offbeat anti-Sicilians. So we saw 4 queen takes d4 in a few other games with which he was pretty successful. Knight takes d4, knight f6, f3 now. And I've played this line and it's quite interesting. It was the subject of a book by Sergei Kasparov, not a relative, I don't think, called Steamrolling the Sicilian. And the idea, in fact, is, if black doesn't react quickly, then you're going to play c4 and knight c3 and set up a Maroczy bind. Unfortunately, there's one line that's kind of quite good for black, although I've seen that some strong players, taking it on still as white and doing quite well with it. But that was always what I thought was the biggest problem. Black plays it in this game. So e6, c4, bishop e7, knight c3, castles, bishop e2. Yeah, and now knight c6 is a little bit irritating. Attacking the knight on d4, black's threatening d5, so it feels like knight c2 would be a quite typical move, just removing the knight from attack and stopping black from playing d5 because you're opening the line of the queen on d5. Only, black plays d5 anyway, and after takes, c takes d5, knight b4, black will get this central pawn back. And it's just going to be an equal position. This is this has been played a few times. a3, bishop e3, knight takes d5. I have seen some white players. I think Luke McShane did this against Gawain in a London tournament, 2018, maybe something like that. d5, takes, and then c5, which is quite interesting. The idea, of course, is bishop c5, then knight c6. And I think I've also seen just people taking on c6 and giving this structure. I never thought it was going to be that much for white, i.e. nothing at all. But I've seen, white's done fairly well in these types of positions. So maybe it's one of those that's harder to play for black than you think. But of course, worst case scenario for black, if you're looking for a win, white can just play, go for the exchange of all the pawns and you've got absolutely nothing. So, if black wants to play for a bit more positively for a win from these positions, you go for a hedgehog structure with b6. So castles, bishop b7, bishop e3, knight bd7, queen d2, and now a6. And this is the typical hedgehog structure. Very spiky pawns there. Black stopping anything from coming into f5 or d5 or b5 even. And there's always the chance of breaks with b5 and d5, as well as maybe an attack against the c4 pawn. But in principle, black's also got to be willing just to sit and wait as well for whatever action white wants to take. Funnily enough, I tried when I was writing, contributing to opening books for the TCC. I tried quite a few hedgehogs because I like the systems and tried quite a few sharp ones, but they always seem to end up in draws somehow. The engines might give something like a clear advantage, but somehow it never managed to turn into anything that was leading to a win. So now these positions are quite tricky always. Black often needs to sit and wait, but if he does it in just the right way, he might get an opportunity to break in the center. Well, so what would you expect Mariotti to do? Something aggressive, and he doesn't disappoint. g4. G4, pretty nice from white, looking to play the move G5. I mean, I suppose that you could say that it is maybe a little bit early because, you might want black to commit himself a bit more, and then afterwards you play G4. So, I mean, you could play, a rook to the center, a pawn to B3, maybe the king to H1, and, then maybe look for G4. But Mariotti does it straight away. The engine's not enormously impressed. H6 was played by black, and the engines think this is pretty good. I mean, what the engines are sort of looking at really are, plans like knight H7 and basically trying to, solidify yourself on the kingside dark squares, because white finds it very hard to get an h4 or even f4 because it weakens the e4 square. So that was really what the engines were thinking about. And from that point of view, having the queen on d8, for example, is pretty good. If it was if you'd already transferred it over to the queen side, then you'd have a lot less grip on the dark squares. But here, you're pretty good. I mean, this knight can also come around e5 to g6. We're targeting these, and well, you'll see in the game, and that's also a major idea. Black can play the rather striking move g5, but clamping down on the f4 square, and eventually giving a black knight a square on f4. So plenty of possibilities, but nothing clear yet. Rook c1 was played by Mariotti, so he's played his g4. Now he's just going to consolidate a little bit there. Rook c8 played by black, b3, rook e8, all pretty standard moves. Rook fd1, little bit surprising for me in a way, I suppose, because when you've played a move like g4, I'd sort of expect you to be keeping something on the king side somehow. But I mean, Mariotti's simply claiming that g4 is useful to have. Who knows when it might come in handy. And otherwise, you're just making sure that the black doesn't break out. The problem is that d5 is often played as a pawn sacrifice, and of course, having played g4, the white king is weaker. I mean, the dark squares are pretty weak around the king. So yeah, that would always be a possibility. I mean, the engines actually came up with quite an interesting plan. They were very keen on keeping the queen on d8, with a bishop on e7, keeping some control over the dark squares there. So there were a couple of ideas. Knight f8 was one idea. And if you go h4, then we go knight h7, really aiming for those dark squares there. And after h5, well, you've managed to stop white from playing h4 and g5, and then the engines were playing back again, maybe knight d7 to e5. A little bit mysterious, but not too bad. I kind of like what Torch did the most, and that was rook c7, bishop f2, and then knight e5, knight c2, and then rook d7. Really showing that you're intending to play for d5 there, and it was quite interesting. Queen d4, queen b8, just willing to give away this pawn. There's all sorts of breaks happening, d5, all that sort of stuff. Bishop g3, bishop d8, knight b4, bishop c7, queen f2, g5. Knight a4, rook dd8, just getting out of the way of an attack. An attack with knight b6. Now if you do it, we'll have a bishop takes c4 discovered, and then bishop b6. Knight c3, knight g6. And again, quite interesting. You've managed to get some control of f4, and you might be aiming to go d5 sometime, even as a pawn sacrifice. Very, very murky, unclear, difficult positions here. I mean, what actually happened in the game was quite nice. This was actually Torch against Stockfish now. Queen d4, king g7, a4, clamping down on the queen side there, and then Stockfish started attacking with h5. Very, very interesting play there. Torch kept the balance, but it was, it wasn't easy. So, I mean, all sorts of interesting maneuvers. Very, very typical for black to be maneuvering like that behind the flanks. Haven't seen this rook c7 to d7 too often. That's why I kind of liked it somehow. But pretty nice, really. I mean, another idea that black was playing here was knight fd7, and then g5, and then knight g6 there, h5, and knight f4. All quite possible. And you can see basically that black's As long as black sort of really tries and plays along the on the dark squares, and brings his pieces to bear on those kingside dark squares, then black's doing absolutely fine. It's not bad for white at all, but nothing special. What black does is play some quite normal moves. Queen c7. Bishop f2 played by Mariotti, probably I guess looking for h4 and maybe also for bishop g3 to pressure d6, and now queen b8. But the engines don't really like that very much. The queen on b8 is not helping to fight for the kingside dark square, so it's going to make it just a little bit easier for white to get in h4 and maybe to get in g5. I mean, that's the break that you really want, just to break open the kingside like that. Use that h6 pawn then as a hook for opening up either the g file or the h file. Bishop g3 played, rook ed8, and the engine's not 100% happy with that either. And now h4, and the engines think that this has turned out quite nicely for white. I mean, the queen's not doing anything. The bishop's attacking this d6 pawn nicely, and white's managed to get an h4, and g5 is coming. So knight h7 was played by black. King h2, a slightly surprising move. I'd always think more of playing king g2, but I guess that that Mariotti was thinking about playing f4 and just wanted to be out of the way here. Or maybe he was thinking about playing rook g1 and didn't want the king on the g file. He thought that he needed the rook on the g file and he was going to play g5. I mean, both are possible explanations. I think probably the second one is the most likely one. But black took the opportunity here to play g5. So we've seen this move before. Black trying to stake a claim to the kingside dark squares and stop white from expanding, and also stop white from pushing. Mariotti played some quite nice moves here. I mean, actually, the engines think that g5 is an absolute disaster here. And what they're looking at is simply the move knight d5 straight away. Plus 1.3, so they're just saying big advantage now. The idea being, it's very simple: knight f5, bishop f8, e takes d5. And the engines just consider that long term, we're going king g2, we're going rook h1, we're playing bishop d3. Black doesn't have the possibility to deal with this. It's all too passive for black. I mean, I can understand it. I don't know whether if I was sacrificing like this, I'd be a little nervous. I guess I'd be thinking, very good long-term compensation. If I blundered the piece, I'd be unbelievably happy, but I'm not sure I'd be thinking about sacrificing a piece this early. But for the engines, it's already clear, and lots of wins for white from there. But what Mariotti did was incredibly sensible and still very, very strong. Just takes on g5 and king g2, and you're just trying to exploit the open h file. You're just moving the king away now, going to double up the rooks, and then later you're going to have your knight d5s and your knight f5s. Frankly, a very sensible way of playing. So black played knight f8, rook h1, knight g6, and now rook h5. You're nicely in time there, in actual fact. So you're attacking the pawn on g5 now, preparing to go here. And knight h4 doesn't worry you at all. I mean, you might take off and bring the queen in there. That's going to be pretty winning in this position. You could even just go king f2 and then still be threatening rook g5. All sorts of possibilities here. So king g7 played by black. That's pretty sensible. And now knight d5 from Mariotti. And this makes perfect sense. When the kings move to g7, you play knight d5 now, and you're going to get in knight f5 with check. I mean, it's just a very good move. If black doesn't react at all, then you're just going to take on e7, and then the g5 pawn is hanging. It's as always, you're looking at it and you're saying, if the queen was on d8, everything would be a lot more solid somehow. But with the queen on b8, you're just it's just you're just way too far away there. The game. I like these games where the opponent's queen is sort of pushed out of the game somehow. You saw this a lot in the Alpha Zero Stockfish games, and really reminds me of a classic example. It's between Capablanca and the English amateur Sir George Thomas, where Sir George Thomas had one of the tournaments of his life where he shared equal first at Hastings, it was, wasn't it? And just in an unbelievably strong field, and he beat Capablanca as black. And it was all about actually Capablanca playing quite poorly positionally and getting his queen cut off. And then, all the tactics somehow worked. And that is what you notice when a queen is out of play. The queen is often, doesn't look like it's doing very much, but it often covers a huge amount of squares. When it's out of play, suddenly squares are weak. And this is what you're seeing in this game. So e takes d5, knight f5 with check, king f8. A little bit of a strange move now. Knight takes e7 from Mariotti. E takes d5 looks really sensible. I mean, you can always take this guy, right? Because bishop f6, you've got bishop takes d6. So, you've always got the chance to take this guy, and you might as well just take the pawn and then just maybe think about going rook h1 before giving this up. Slightly surprised. I mean, it's +5, so it's a very good move still, but it just feels a little bit strange to rush with that. But I guess that Mariotti liked very much taking with check, with tempo. Knight f6, horrific self-pin, and then e takes d5. And it must be said, it looks completely winning, right? You're going bishop d3 and rook e1, and how are you defending all this stuff? Well, rook h8 was played by black, and now another slightly strange move from Mariotti, I have to say. Rook e1 is just like really obvious somehow, just to get the rook on there. I guess that Mariotti was a little bit worried about this line when you might get stuff like rook g8. So for example, bishop h4, then rook g8. But you can just play f4 in this position. Rook g8, queen h4, and you're just going to win a piece back, right? I mean, it's just there's no way that the black can keep all this together, and it's just going to be complete carnage. But I think that was probably what Mariotti didn't want. Just wanted to play it safe, maybe already in a little bit of time trouble, and just took on h8, rook h8, and then played the move bishop d3. Immediately, rook e1 feels nicer. I mean, you could put the bishop anywhere really, but bishop d3, but black played knight e5, and now Mariotti took on e5. It's all fine. It's all okay, but maybe you would have expected after knight e5 to play rook e1 somehow first, rather than taking on e5. Taking all those, it's always what you want to do is always just delay your captures for as long as possible, basically, just to give the opponent as the least warning, basically, of what you're going to do. And if you take too early, then the opponent knows exactly, and sometimes he just gets extra squares that he can use for his pieces. So I think rook e1 would have been better, but this is still really, really good, of course. Queen d6, that's what I mean by using an extra square. If you played rook e1 and only bishop e5 later, you wouldn't have had the d6 square for the queen, but it's still very, very good here. So White's got 3 pawns for the piece. This bishop is totally cut out. This king is quite loose. Plenty of play as well. But there's nothing. It's not 100% clear how you're going to make the finishing off bit happen. Queen f4 was a good first start. You're not threatening rook e8 check yet because of knight e8 defending the queen. But okay, you're threatening a move like g5, for example. The knight moves away, and then you've got rook e8. And actually, after black's bishop c8, then g5 was really the move that you wanted to play here. And I do actually wonder why Mariotti didn't do that. He might have seen this move, which looks quite cunning. The idea is after g takes f6, we've got queen takes e5. We're just pinning the pawn across there. But you might want to stop the video here and try and find a very unusual tactic that Torch and Stockfish pointed out. And that tactic is the absolutely gorgeous bishop g6, in actual fact. Haven't seen one like this before. The point is that if f takes g6, we go rook e8 check, and because the f file has been opened, you can no longer play knight e8 to defend the queen. So you go king e8 and we go queen d6. You can go rook g5, but we go king f2, and these positions are just very, very good for white. I mean, you're going to take this pawn, and then afterwards you're just going to have, pass C and D pawns rolling, and you'll probably pick up the A pawn as well somehow, whilst black is looking for counterplay. So that would have been really, really nice somehow. I mean, maybe Mariotti was, sort of didn't quite see that somehow, which is not, no disgrace certainly. What Mariotti did was play the move b4, which also feels quite sensible. After b4, you just want to play c5 and c6, basically. Funnily enough, the engines say after queen d8, the black is back to equality. It's crazy, isn't it? It's just so hard to follow all this. But I mean, actually, the point is black wanted to play b5, and actually getting in c5, the d5 pawn is hanging, and there's no actual very clear way of making it happen. And well, of course, when this knight moves away from here, you're also getting counterplay with queen h4. Suddenly this open h file is being used against white. So yeah, tricky, always very, very tricky here. But of course, this is just going to be much easier for white to play than black. And well, Mariotti didn't want to play c5 here. Knight d5, queen d4, knight f4 check is what the engines want, followed by queen d3, and yeah, we've got lots of checks coming in there. So he played queen g5 in this position. And the engines want to play bishop b7, keep on attacking this pawn on d5, stop white from playing c5, here because of takes and bishop d5. The engines actually feel that this is about equal. Rook f5, we go queen d6. This is the key move that you have to see. And you're going to get queen h2s coming in if you take on f6. So so white's got nothing better than queen f4, but then this is it looks quite promising for white somehow, but the engines think that black should be able to hold like this. But after queen g5, black made the mistake of going bishop d7, and I think he was just looking randomly for a waiting move that stopped rook f5, worried about that one. But this is really serious. I mean, actually, white could already play c5 now and get those pawns rolling. Mariotti actually played the very calm a3, but it doesn't mess anything up at all. Bishop c8 was played, and now played c5. Obviously, you can't take on d5 now because of the pin. And after b takes c5, b takes c5. I mean, you're just going to carry on, d6 and all sorts of threats, or c6 as well. Just really, really worrying there. After bishop d7, actually, Mariotti played the rather cheeky bishop a6. I guess that after c6, maybe worried about bishop takes c6 there. So just cheekily took the pawn on a6. Why not? Rook h7 played by black. It's just kind of hard to find moves here. And now c6, now that you're no longer pinned. Black played bishop takes c6. Obviously a little bit desperate, looking for some counterplay, looking for checks along the back. But it turns out that these checks are not that important in actual fact, because now there's quite a lot of room and quite a lot of protection. Queen c1 check, king e4, and black actually resigned in this position. You're covering the squares like e2, and if you go king c2, we go queen f4, queen d2, rook e3, and we covered. Queen a pawn covering queen b4, queen covering queen d4, queen covering there, and no checks from the rook either. So, and of course, plenty of threats brewing against the black king as well. So there we are. Black resigned, and that was a win for Mariotti at the Lugano Open in 1982. Thought that was really interesting somehow. I like like very much the really aggressive reaction on g4. But I also thought that Mariotti built up his attack quite nice. He was quite calm in this game. Simply no sudden sacrifices, but just a nice calm building up on the H file. And yeah, maybe the conversion was a little bit too calm. You sort of thought, just played it kind of safe all the way, I suppose you'd say. Just taking on the E7 there. When you think, well, just take on D5, got so many advantages in your position. And yeah, a little bit later as well. But yeah, although Black, theoretically had equality, it was a very difficult position for Black to play, and not surprising that Black didn't manage to hold it. I'm not sure what. I certainly wouldn't have felt comfortable or confident with Black, holding a position like that. So there we are. Very nice game indeed. Hope you're enjoying this series. Got a few more to come, so including some really, really nice ones still. So do stay tuned for that. Give a like, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying it, and hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.